Hi, everybody. Welcome to Northland Voices. I'm Barbara Riles. A businessman from the Brainerd Lakes area has received the GOP endorsement as the candidate Republicans would like to see unseat Minnesota's 8th District Congressman Rick Nolan. 41-year-old Stuart Mills has been busy meeting with voters and leaders across the state. He says he can no longer sit back and complain about the problems in Washington, D.C. without rolling up his sleeves and offering to get out there and fix the problems.
In Washington, D.C., we have to create jobs and prosperity. We have to repeal and replace Obamacare with something that actually works. We have to restore respect for our Constitution, and we have to establish fiscal sanity.
Mills has no Republican challengers for the GOP endorsement. And joining us now, fresh off that endorsement convention, is Stuart Mills. And Stuart, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me, Barbara.
So what made you've never held political office, you've never run for county or city office, state. What made you decide to run for national office?
Well, first of all, I believe in we the people, a government of the people, for the people, by the people. And I was somebody who was outspoken, first of all, about Obamacare. I'm the plan administrator of our company's self-insured health plan. It covers over 6,000 of our team members and their families. And as that, I was an outspoken critic against Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. And also, I'm a sportsman. I shoot competitively. I know how guns work. And I've also been an outspoken critic against gun control. And through my participation in the public dialogue, it came to a point where either put up or shut up. It was time to get off the bench and put some skin in the game or go away quietly. And I decided that when you start something, you're honor-bound, duty-bound to finish it.
All right, let's talk about the political part of all of this, because although we did have a very short-term Republican in this congressional office, we have had a Democrat in the 8th District for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And some say that Representative Kravac was kind of a whoops even, and now here you are trying to get this seat back from a Democrat. What do you think your chances are in the 8th District?
Very good. This is a Republican district. It just doesn't know it yet. When you take a look at the trend lines and the voting patterns, every year it has trended Republican year after year, just on the pure math of it, just on the pure trend lines. This is the year this district is set for a flip, and it's going to stay there. It's going to stay Republican, because when you travel around this district, everybody agrees. People don't want to sign up for Obamacare. They don't want to turn in their guns, and they don't want to trade their paycheck for an unemployment check. This is a very conservative, philosophically, very conservative district.
Would you say you're a pure Republican?
I don't know what that is meant. I can tell you what I stand for, and then you can draw your own conclusions.
Well, what about the Tea Party? Where do you come down on the Tea Party?
You know, I've never had really any involvement with the Tea Party up until running for office, and I've met with them, and the one thing that impresses me about them is they care more about your rights and your liberties than anything they would want for themselves from the government.
Would you consider yourself a Tea Party candidate?
I'm not going to define myself or accept any labels, but I consider myself a conservative, and that is the business community, the Second Amendment rights community, the Republicans, the constitutionalists, the libertarians, and that includes the Tea Party. So I'm not necessarily in any wing of the conservative movement.
So you don't want to accept labels, but you did accept the Republican endorsement.
Yes.
Is that important to your campaign?
Oh, yes.
Why?
Very much so. Well, first of all, I am running as a Republican. I am a Republican, so there will be an R behind my name, and it would be difficult to do so if I didn't have the support of the Republicans.
Can you work across the aisle? Can you get along with others who maybe don't have the exact same philosophy as you?
I'm in business, and you don't stay in business for very long unless you're able to work with people and to make compromises, and also at times when you're going the wrong direction, change course.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your business so our audience can learn a little bit more about you. Fleet Farms, you're of that family. Tell us about that. How did you grow up, and how did you, what did you do in the business?
Well, my dad grew up during the Great Depression, and when he got back from military service in 1955, he and his twin brother Hank retooled my grandfather's auto parts stores for the ag community. And through that, we grew and took on a lot of different things other than just automotive parts and ag stuff. I mean, we got into pet food and we got into sporting goods and a lot of really fun stuff. And because my family has always had a strong work ethic, since before I was 14, I'm sure my dad violated some child labor laws. But
we do that in our families,
yes,
don't we?
but the statute of limitations are up on that, I'm sure. But work was a virtue. And so I mopped floors and stocked shelves at a very early age, and I worked my way up in the business. And it was something that was expected of us.
Is that something that will help you as you move into this, if you get elected and move into this position?
Certainly. Not only will the work ethic my father instilled in me be helpful, but also the opportunities I've had to merchandise and to be the administrator of not only our self-insured health plan, but also of our 401k profit sharing plan and a very large workforce. So the fact that work was something that was expected of us, I had the ability to work up through the steps of the company and kind of see things globally. And I believe that that opportunity to be an employer of over 6,000 people, to know what it's like to meet payroll, to start new stores, to reinvest back in our businesses, and to create jobs will be exceedingly helpful, because I think that's what's lacking in Washington, D.C.
I think we should be run more like a business.
I think we should have more people with a business background that understands how the economy works in Washington, D.C.
Some might say that you don't look like a typical Republican.
Well, and I think that's evidence that I never had any inclination of running for any office whatsoever. This is a very genuine, honest campaign that's based on policy. It's not based on any political ambition of seeking political office.
How's your fundraising going?
Very good. There's a lot of people that are responding to our message, and it's a good message. And we're putting up a big tent, we're filling it up, and there's a lot of people that want to invest in our campaign because they believe what I believe.
These people who want to invest, a lot of outside organizations, outside of politics, are getting into the 8th District, many other districts. How do you feel about some of these wealthy organizations, well-heeled organizations coming in and speaking for you?
Well, I don't know if they're speaking for me or not, but the most recent fundraising numbers that were put out is that I was able to raise about $162,000 from individuals, where my opponent was only able to raise $102,000 from individuals. My opponent, Rick Nolan, the bulk of his fundraising is coming from lobbyists and it's coming from political action committees.
All right. Well, the money's important, and it's important that we talk about that. But the issues are also very important to the voters of this region. We're going to talk with Stuart Mills about that. He says there are 4 pillars to his campaign, and we'll find out what those pillars are when we come back. 1,000 Minnesotans could be impacted by Medicare cuts, which 8th District candidate Stuart Mills opposes. Mills says under Obamacare, over the next 4 years, the Medicare home health budget or benefit would be cut by 14%. Home health community representatives say these cuts, which went into effect in January, will threaten 8,000 health care jobs in Minnesota and 500,000 jobs nationwide. Mills says the cuts also endanger access to cost-effective health care for patients receiving in-home treatments.
We're predicted to cut about $66 billion from our home health care systems. And those are the people that are the most vulnerable. First of all, the care is better in their homes. It's better for them to be in their homes.
To restore funding to Medicare, Mills says he'd like to see Obamacare repealed and replaced with a free market alternative. And we're talking with Republican 8th District Congressional Republican candidate Stuart Mills today on Northland Voices. You've said your campaign has 4 pillars: health care, gun control, national debt, and balancing the environment with economics. And we're going to talk about all those as best we can in the time we have, but I want to start with health care because that's something you've been quite adamant about. You don't like Obamacare. What's wrong with it?
Well, first of all, what we have done is we have taken over private insurance companies and turned them into government-controlled public utilities. And the government has taken over by that mechanism about 1/6 of the economy in attempting, albeit poorly, to centrally plan it. And centrally planned economies don't work. It didn't work for the Soviet Union. It's not working for the Democrats, and it won't work in the future.
Do you think that if you give this plan a chance, I mean, they've just begun instituting it, do you think if you give it a chance it might work?
No, because right out of the gate, what has happened is these plans are now costing more through the Obamacare exchanges. The deductibles and co-pays are higher, and the networks are actually skinnier, which means that people have less access to care.
A lot of people say our health care system was out of control. We were spending too much money. We weren't getting enough bang for the buck, that something needed to change. Do you think something needed to change?
Yes,
Yeah.
but what they're doing is they're taking it in the wrong direction, because if the entire point of the Affordable Care Act or health reform in any fashion was to increase access and to bring down costs, they went about it entirely the wrong way.
So would you throw the whole thing out and start over?
I certainly would push it to the side and bring in free market alternatives that actually work, because every time that government, you can go back in human history, but every time that government has attempted to deliver a product, good, or service, costs have gone up, and quality has gone down.
All right, let's move on to gun control,
Okay.
because what you say is you support the right to bear arms because it's
Very
our
much so.
constitutional right. Who's talking about throwing out the guns?
Well, Dianne Feinstein. Back in 1995, she very clearly said her end goal is Mr. and Mrs. America, turn them all in. And as soon as Rick Nolan got to Washington, D.C., he lined up right behind her.
Rick Nolan's a hunter. He has said he owns a lot of guns and that he would never take away people's guns. And Dianne Feinstein was, 15 years ago? So.
Well, actually, you can go, when Rick was out in D.C. for the first time, he went to Sunday morning talk shows and he espoused gun control measures. Rick feels the Second Amendment is a privilege to hunt given to us by government, not the individual right to bear arms that is enshrined in our Constitution.
Do you see gun control differently from just taking away our constitutional right to bear arms? Do you think that we need any kind of gun control at all?
Certainly we need to enforce the laws we have right now, but taking away people's individual rights and liberties, abridging them or amending them, is not the way to make a better America.
All right, moving on to national debt. Our debt sits at what, $17 trillion?
17.3, almost 17.4.
Yeah, and I know a lot of political candidates have gone to Washington saying they're going to change that. They're going to lower the national debt, and yet it keeps growing. So how, I know you say we've got to do something. What would you do?
Well, first of all, it's largely a math problem. And the real problem is our interest payments, the debt service. Right now it's over $250 billion a year just in interest payments. We get nothing for that. However, as we continue to add to our debt through deficit spending, and as interest rates return to historic levels, soon we'll be close to $1 trillion a year just in debt service alone. When that happens, we'll look more like Greece or Cyprus than the exceptional America that our parents and our grandparents gave to us.
So when you talk about paying money to reduce that debt, the money's got to come from somewhere.
Yes.
So what would you cut?
Well, first of all, it's not a zero-sum game. You have to increase the size of the pie. You have to look back to our last best place of success, which was during the Reagan administration, when within 10 years we were able to double the amount the Treasury was able to take in. We had the largest peacetime economic expansion in U.S. history. We need to expand and grow the economy, because the last 5 years, the Democrats have controlled the economy. Been the worst economic recovery in U.S. history.
But let's get back to the cuts.
Okay.
I want to ask you how you would create jobs and grow the economy, but let's talk about what you'd cut first.
Well, first of all, right now we're spending between $50 and $60 billion a year in fraudulent Medicaid payments, and Medicare payments that nobody's doing anything about. We've turned the Department of Energy into a venture capital firm to the tune of $28 billion, and that has resulted in over $11 billion worth of bankruptcies. Now, there's other components too, which are, again, they're still huge, and the $100 million, $200 million that we can look at too. We have duplicative Job training programs are largely doing the same thing. We have over 7 different agencies running over 60 different job training programs. Certainly we can whittle that down. The Obama Phone program. Now the Lifeline program is a very valid program that allows rural America, the 8th District, our part of Minnesota, to be connected to the rest of the country, both digitally and through our phone landlines. It's a very valid program. However, when they put the Obama Phone program into that, we're literally handing out smartphones to people. That's $1.5 million that can be cut right there that can actually preserve and strengthen the Lifeline program.
So you've done some research here.
Oh, quite a bit.
Yeah.
But the big takeaway is that this course that we're on is not sustainable.
Okay, let's talk about social welfare.
Yes.
What would you change? Because that's fairly expensive in this country.
It is.
So would you change that, or are we doing the right thing now?
Well, when I take a look at what happened during the 90s, when Bill Clinton said that welfare as we know it is over, we had a workable system. I'm the type of guy that believes that a Republican or Democrat, we can look to our last best place of success. We can replicate that in the here and now. And what Clinton did with welfare to work was something that we should adapt to the here and now.
Well, you like the welfare to work program.
I hope that there isn't anybody in the 8th District that doesn't like welfare to work, because it should be a social safety net that keeps people out of poverty, that falls through the cracks. It should not be a way of life.
All right, we need to take another quick break here.
Okay.
A 4th pillar of Mill's campaign strategy is balancing care of the environment with economic development, and that is an issue that draws a lot of attention in the Northland right now as we debate copper-nickel mining. We'll hear candidate Stuart Mill's position on that when we come back. During a recent comment period on Polymet's environmental impact statement, people traveled from all over Minnesota to have their voices heard at hearings held by the DNR. With a turnout of people that we saw, obviously there's a lot of passionate feeling about this issue. Bryce Henry reports.
I want this project to go through. I want to see the young people who I am educating right now one day work at Polymet.
But for others, the potential cost to the environment from mining is far too great. Often pitting neighbors against neighbors, the debate has raged on for over 10 years. Some have been active since the start.
We don't want to crap on our own nest. That's really what it amounts to. We want to permit this so that it's done right, that it's done clean.
If they can't clean up the iron mining industry, which has been in existence for 130 years, why should we have faith that they're going to police the sulfide mining industry?
The decade of talks for and against the project prompted busloads of people from the Iron Range to attend the hearing on Thursday. Polymet executives say they're confident they'll get the green light.
No, we're actually very confident in the design that's on the table. We've intentionally taken our time over the last several years to ensure that we have a design that's defensible.
In Duluth, Bryce Henry, KBJR6 and Range 11.
If permits and land exchange are approved, Polymet could begin development by the latter part of this year. And the big question around here is, of course, everybody wants to know where politicians, from people running for city council all the way through running for Congress and the Senate. So how do you feel about copper-nickel mining in general?
Unlike my opponent, I haven't waffled on it. I've been straightforward from the very beginning, and I'm very much in favor of Polymet. It's a great project.
When you say Nolan waffled on it, Nolan is a supporter, and my understanding of what he said on this is, I will support it as long as the environment is protected. Is that waffling?
No, when you go back before that, that's just his recent comments that, again, have been slightly askew from fully supporting it. But when you go back to it, he was against it at one time, and then he was for it, and then arguably he could be against it, but now he's solidly for it. You don't know where he is on the issue.
Have you looked into the environmental concerns about the sulfides that could escape during this process and get into the groundwater? You know,
very much so. And I have every assurance and every belief that Polymet will meet the wild rice standards. And that's a very stringent standard that's even more stringent than the drinking water standard.
Some say that that's a whole other issue, because some say that the wild rice standards are not strong enough and should be looked at again. And I know that it's actually still up in the air about whether they're going to increase those sulfide standards. But I'm curious to know about the research you've done. You say you've talked and been assured by those plant officials that they're going to care for the environment.
Well, right now, the current LTV plant that is there is polluting right now. And what they're going to do is come in, they're going to remove the pollution, they're going to clean it up, and they're going to operate it in an environmental and economically sustainable fashion, creating a lot of jobs for our part of Minnesota.
Well, let's talk about jobs. Have you looked into how many jobs would be created, not just at the plant, but in the spin-off industries as well?
Well, I mean, those are things that economists can extrapolate all the way out, but it could be anywhere from 2,000 to 10,000.
And some have said that people who are supporters like yourself are criticized for saying you care more about those jobs and about the money that those jobs will bring to our region than you do about the environment. What do you say when they say that to you?
Well, first of all, our family came here in the 1870s to work in the timber industry. My great-grandfather mined iron on the southern edge of the Cuyuna Range. And so not only do we care about the jobs, not only do we want to have the jobs that allow us to stay here, but we want to make sure that our water, our drinking water, is clean and pure. We hunt here, we fish here, and there is nothing that we would do to endanger the environment for ourselves or for our children. And the PolyMet project is very well engineered. The science is there to support it. And when they look back at problems they had in other copper-nickel plants, if they're looking back 60 or 70 years ago in Colorado, that is not the future. That is the past.
You are an avid outdoorsman. You mentioned the hunting. We talked about gun control and the right to bear arms and so on. So this is something that would hit you personally if the environment were to be damaged in any way.
Well, and again, the engineering is there. You have a plant that's polluting right now. It's sitting derelict. So when you bring jobs forward, you actually positively impact the environment.
All right, we are out of time. Stuart Mills will be back to wrap up this edition of Northland Voices right after this. Well, that does it for this week's Northland Voices. We want to thank our guest, Stuart Mills. Thank you very much, and we'll be following your political path as you move ahead with your campaign.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And we thank you for watching. We hope to see you again next Sunday. Till then, have a good week.